Imagine waking up in a medieval village, your throat dry, your hands rough from work, and the nearest stream glittering in the sunlight. You're thirsty, but you can't simply drink from that stream. You know what it carries? Disease, filth, and death. For medieval peasants, finding safe water was a daily challenge. Wells could be tainted by waste, streams could carry the runoff of nearby farms, and stagnant ponds were breeding grounds for illness. Yet people survived generation after generation without the modern comforts of purification, plumbing, or bottled water. How did they do it? How did ordinary men and women stay hydrated in a world where water could kill you? Today we'll explore how medieval peasants found clever, practical, and sometimes surprising ways to quench their thirst and stay alive in a world where every sip came with a risk. 1. The paradox of water in the Middle Ages. It's easy to assume that medieval people avoided water altogether. In truth, they depended on it but handled it with caution. Freshwater sources were vital for survival, but not all were equal. Springs and deep wells were safest, while rivers and ponds were most dangerous. The closer a village was to human activity, the more likely its water was contaminated. Waste disposal was crude. Livestock often grazed near water sources, and runoff carried bacteria long before anyone knew what it was. Despite this, water wasn't forbidden. It was filtered through layers of cloth, boiled when possible, or mixed with other ingredients to make it safer. But more often than not, peasants turned to other drinks entirely, ones that used the power of fermentation and boiling to make contaminated water harmless. That's where small beer, cider, and mead became the lifeblood of the medieval diet. 2. Small beer, the drink of daily life. For the medieval peasant, beer wasn't a luxury, it was survival. Small beer was a weak alcohol brew consumed throughout the day by men, women, and even children. It contained just enough alcohol to kill harmful microbes, but not enough to intoxicate. It was brewed from malted barley or oats, flavored with herbs, and boiled with water, the boiling process itself eliminating dangerous bacteria. The result was a slightly cloudy, nourishing drink with trace amounts of alcohol and calories. Every household with access to grain could make it. Brew days were social events. Villagers gathered to heat water over open fires, stir in malt, and strain the mixture through cloth. The first brew, strong beer, was for celebrations or adults. The weaker second or third brews became the family's daily drink. Small beer wasn't just hydration, it was nutrition. It contained carbohydrates, minerals, and even yeast proteins. In many ways, it was a liquid meal. 3. Alewives, the keepers of liquid survival. Throughout much of medieval Europe, the art of brewing rested in the hands of women. They were called alewives, and their skill was as essential to survival as bread baking. Alewives brewed beer in small batches, often in the same pots used for cooking. The ingredients were simple: barley, oats, and water, but the timing and temperature required knowledge passed down through generations. Their brew was sold locally, often marked by a bundle of straw hanging outside the door, the sign of fresh ale. In towns, alehouses became gathering places, where laborers paid a few pennies for a mug of safety. Without these women, many villages would have gone thirsty. In an age before sanitation and medicine, their cauldrons were lifelines. Ale wasn't just a comfort drink. It was a health strategy. Its humble foam lay the difference between sickness and survival. For cider and perry, nature's sweet solution. Not every region had enough grain to spare for brewing. In areas rich with fruit trees, peasants turned to another source: apples and pears. By crushing and fermenting fruit, they created cider and perry drinks that were naturally sterile thanks to the fermentation process. These beverages stored well through winter and provided vital hydration and vitamins when fresh produce was scarce. Unlike ale, cider could be made by anyone with access to an orchard and a press. Families collected wind-fallen fruit, crushed it with wooden mallets, and stored the juice in barrels. Within days, fermentation began, creating a safe, mildly alcoholic beverage. In cider regions of England and Normandy, even children drank diluted cider daily. It was sweet, refreshing, and safe, a far better option than the murky pond water just beyond the village fence. 5. Herbal and spice drinks, medieval infusions. When neither beer nor cider was available, peasants sometimes turned to herbal infusions, early forms of what we might now call tea. Plants like chamomile, mint, fennel, and sage were steeped in boiled water, creating drinks that were not only safe but medicinal. Some believed they balanced the humors of the body. Others simply enjoyed their taste. In regions where boiling water became common practice for infusions, illnesses dropped. Although peasants had no understanding of microbes, they noticed the correlation between boiled drinks and fewer ailments. In essence, herbal teas were a quiet revolution, a simple method of purification hidden within daily ritual. 6. The role of soups, stews, and broths. Hydration in the Middle Ages didn't always come in the form of drinks. Much of it came from food. Thick vegetable soups, grain porridges, and meaty broths provided liquid nourishment that filled both belly and body. A single bowl of pottage, a stew made from whatever ingredients were available, could provide hydration and calories for an entire day. Peasants often reheated leftover stews, adding a bit of water each time. The constant boiling kept the meals safe to consume and ensured no liquid went to waste. Even in scarcity, the medieval kitchen made use of every drop. What modern nutritionists call hydration from food was simply a natural part of peasant survival. 7. Wells and springs, the village lifelines. In some villages, fortune came in the form of clean underground water. Deep wells and natural springs were precious resources, often protected and maintained by the entire community. Wells were dug far from latrines and livestock pens, their walls lined with stone to prevent collapse. Water from these sources was clearer and less likely to be contaminated. Many of these wells became spiritual places, dedicated to saints believed to protect the purity of water. Pilgrims sometimes traveled miles to drink from a holy well. In truth, what made these waters special was often simple geology, deep filtration through layers of rock and sand that removed impurities naturally. Even so, not every peasant had access to such purity. For many, wells were communal and rationed. Fetching water was a daily labor, carried in wooden buckets balanced on yokes across the shoulders. It was heavy, exhausting, and vital. 8. Mead and honey drinks, sweet hydration from the hive, wherever bees thrived. So did another drink mead, the ancient honey wine. While mead was more common among monks and wealthier peasants, it had practical origins. Honey, when mixed with water and allowed to ferment, produced a drink that was naturally antiseptic and long-lasting. Even weak mead contained enough alcohol to purify the water it was mixed with. For those who couldn't afford much honey, diluted versions, sometimes called honey water, were common. A spoonful of honey stirred into boiled water not only made a sweet refreshment, but provided energy during long labor in the fields. Mead was often reserved for special occasions, yet its idea turning water into something safe and sustaining was a constant thread through medieval hydration. 9. Fermented dairy, a hidden source of liquid life. In many regions, especially where cows and goats were kept, milk offered another hydration source. But fresh milk spoiled quickly and could carry its own dangers. To make it safe and storable, peasants turned to fermentation once again. They created drinks like clappered milk or whey, both byproducts of cheese-making. Whey, the clear liquid left after curds were separated, was often drunk directly or mixed into soups. Slightly sour but refreshing, it contained electrolytes, protein, and hydration in one. This practice remains in parts of rural Europe even today, echoing medieval methods of using every part of an animal's produce for survival. 10. Boiling, filtering, and primitive purification. Though they lacked germ theory, medieval people observed patterns. They noticed that water used in brewing or boiling didn't cause the same illnesses as raw water. Over time, small purification rituals emerged. Peasants filtered water through linen or sand before using it. Some even added a splash of vinegar or wine, unknowingly lowering bacterial content with acid. Others placed hot stones into containers of water to mimic boiling when they lacked metal pots. These methods, while crude, made a significant difference. Each small act of care transformed deadly water into something survivable. It was science born of observation, trial, error, and experience passed through generations. 11. The role of religion and superstition. Water was more than a resource. It was sacred. Churches blessed wells, and holy water was used for protection. Priests sprinkled it on homes and livestock, not just as a symbol of faith, but because it often came from the cleanest, most protected sources. Prayers and rituals surrounded the act of drinking and drawing water. Superstition, for all its mystery, sometimes led to practical results by keeping wells enclosed and protected, or by discouraging pollution through religious taboo. Faith, in its own way, became a form of public health. 12. The myth of constant drunkenness. A popular myth says that everyone in medieval Europe was constantly drunk. The truth is far more nuanced. Yes, alcoholic beverages were consumed daily, but they were weak, nourishing, and purposeful. A typical peasant's drink contained less alcohol than modern kombucha or kefir. It refreshed without intoxicating. Children, laborers, monks, and farmers all consumed small beer or cider throughout the day while working, eating, and resting. Drunkenness was frowned upon in most communities, viewed as wasteful and shameful. For medieval people, beer wasn't about escape. It was about endurance. 13. The cost of clean water. Despite all these adaptations, safe water was a privilege. Wealthier households could afford stone cisterns to collect rainwater, or servants to fetch clean supplies from distant springs. Peasants relied on what was near and improvised constantly. Some villages built wooden aqueducts or channels to carry spring water down from hills. Others relied on community effort to clean and guard shared wells. Access to clean water often determined which communities thrived and which fell to disease. It was the silent foundation of survival. In the end, those who lived longest were often those who respected their water the most. When we look back at the medieval world, it's tempting to see only hardship and ignorance. But the truth is more complex. Without understanding bacteria or chemistry, peasants learned to observe patterns, adapt behavior, and create sustainable solutions. They brewed, boiled, fermented, filtered, and flavored their way to safety. Their drinks, small beer, cider, mead, broths, and herbal infusions were all rooted in a single truth, that survival required knowledge, not luck. Hydration wasn't simple, but it was deeply human. A balance between fear and ingenuity, tradition and trial. The next time you turn on a tap, imagine the medieval peasant watching a pot of water boil over the fire, knowing that within that bubbling liquid lay the difference between sickness and another day's life. If you enjoyed this journey into the daily survival of medieval peasants, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more.